All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for our podcast.
Yes.
The second episode. And we've kind of got a little bit of an announcement for you guys. We kind of goofed, Jacob?
We did. There's not much point having a weekly podcast that deals with announcements for the channel if you make it be something that's on early access.
Right. So, guys, we are making our podcast available to everyone live at the same time.
Yep.
No week early access for Patreons. We thought about doing a live stream, and that's something that we'd potentially like to do in the future as kind of a weekly staple of our channel, but for now we're going to stick to pre-recorded video so that we can get this out and not have it be a problem within our schedule, because right now we're getting ready to go on a crazy trip and stuff, so we have to juggle a lot of things in time and tandem. So thank you for being patient with us.
We really appreciate
it. The current podcast episode coming out today will be not only this episode but also the previous episode that was in early access for a week, and it's not going to really fit within the timeline. Yeah. But first off, Jacob, let's talk about the usual stuff. Let's go through our announcements. Are we having any special changes this week?
So, as you know, we have Hunter x Hunter on Tuesdays, and then Psychopaths on Wednesdays, and on Thursdays we just wrapped up Konosuba. So
this episode you're getting the OVA, actually.
Right, we're getting the OVA this week, and then on early access this week is going to be the first episode of the second slot for Hunter x Hunter.
Right.
So, if you want to check that out, that is going to be a thing.
It is going to be a thing. It'll be pretty exciting too.
Oh yeah. That way it'll only take us a year and a half to finish instead of
the other thing is there was a poll on our Patreon recently where you guys voted on whether or not you would want to see Haikyuu come in to replace Konosuba or have a second episode of Hunter x Hunter. Now, that second episode of Hunter x Hunter happening every week doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 2 episodes of Hunter x Hunter for the entirety of its runtime. We're going to be doing that until the end of the first arc, and at that point we'll ask you guys again whether or not 2 episodes a week is something you want, and we'll also reevaluate it.
Oh yeah.
Like, we've never done 2 episodes a week on something, but we can tell that by Hunter x Hunter's pace, it kind of needs it specifically.
Yes. Then on Friday we have MHA, of course, which is going to be
a crazy episode.
Yeah, just a bit.
Absolutely crazy.
And then we've got Ruby Chibi after that on Saturday. And then One Punch Man on Sundays.
And we're getting into the good Deep Sea King stuff. And then into the finale stuff.
Yeah. And then after that, we have Game of Thrones.
Yes, Game of Thrones again. Game of Thrones wrapped up its penultimate episode.
It did
yesterday, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that.
We will, yeah.
So, guys, we are going to be uniquely spending a little bit of this podcast on Game of Thrones stuff. So stick around to the end to learn more about that. But first off, guys, we've been having some fantastic people join us on our Patreon, and we just wanted to give a shout out to the people in our VIP reward tier, as they've been just blowing us away with their generosity. And particular Blake Hall was the 4th person to choose to donate to us at that level. So Blake Hall, thank you, dude. You're awesome. Brofist, you're legit, dude. That means a lot. So,
it does.
Guys, we not only that, we've been breaking past our goals
plus ultra
at just extremely fast pace, and we're kind of blown away by it. So one of the goals that we passed very recently was a convention meetup.
Yes.
So we'll be putting a poll up on our Patreon about which one you would like to see us go to.
Right.
But one of the things that we're leaving the poll kind of open to is right now we're only going to be putting on RTX, Rooster Teeth's annual convention held in Austin, Texas, and then San Diego Comic-Con.
Right.
But we also want to leave an other slot open in the poll.
Yes.
So if you want to insert your con of choice that you would like us to go to, you can fill in the option there. Or you can just leave it in the comments here for other people to get ideas. So
yeah, we are conning virgins. Never been before.
Yeah, we're also bad at conning people, so,
Well, yes. But cons, yes.
Cons, yeah. Yeah, we both have never been to an actual convention before.
Right. So this will be an exciting
closest thing that
first.
we've been to is something that's only got like 50 people in it.
Right.
Or that we don't count that as actually a convention. Yeah. All right. So the first kind of main thing we'd like to kind of go into with this podcast here is we've been having a lot of fun discussing just stories.
Yes.
Like that's the thing that really gets us excited about having this YouTube channel and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But last week we talked about beginnings, so you'll be seeing that like today. But this one we wanted to talk about something that kind of correlates directly into that Game of Thrones episode. We want to talk about characters, but more specifically main characters.
Yes.
Because right about now with Game of Thrones, everyone is a main character right now. Everyone that's basically alive is still a main character. Yeah. But main characters, Jacob, what makes a main character good?
So main characters have to drive the story, for one. And that's actually a lot harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of the times stories will make it so the main character only drives the story. They don't really add anything else to it, and they end up being kind of bland. And that really sucks, because the main character is your number one anchor to the story that you're in. And
especially if there's only one main character.
Yes.
Now we're talking about a story that is maybe a little bit more simple than Game of Thrones, for instance.
Game of Thrones is
we're talking like something basic like a superhero thing, or
just basic hero's journey type stuff.
Yeah, anything where the main character is it's a story from a first person perspective.
Sure. Yeah. And when that happens, and say the main character is apathetic, or doesn't have clear goals, or doesn't have a lot at stake, it bogs down the story. Like,
just
really
a bit.
Does. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've noticed as being a thing that makes me able to tell quickly if this is a character that I'm going to be able to get behind. As a main character, but is how much they are invested and care about their own story.
Yes.
Because one of the things that main characters in particular help us do as the viewers and as the readers or watchers or what have you is really get pulled into the world that they're creating here. Because unless this is a purely non-fictional story of something that relates directly to you, you need to actually be pulled into the story.
You really do.
And the titular main character, for instance, is one of the easiest ways to do that, but it's also one of the ways that people, I would say, make the most mistakes in. So, Jacob, you're a writer. What are some ways that you avoid, kind of main character problems in that regard?
Give them an emotional investment.
Okay.
So, let's say you have a main character, but since you're writing the story, right? It's all a fake story, but you need to make it seem real.
Yeah,
and if it
exactly.
doesn't seem real to the main character, then it is certainly not going to seem real to the audience, right? So you need to go really above and beyond plus ultra to make sure that if there's anything crazy happening, that the hero feels that.
Yeah.
You need to make sure there are a lot of things that they just feel in general, because that's what we link to.
And it doesn't necessarily mean, right, that you needed an emotionally, controlled character where you couldn't have a logical, stoic main character.
Yeah, you can totally do that. You just have to be careful with it. And that's why a lot of the times with stories, they'll do things like revenge plots or whatever, because they're just giving like a basic, super strong emotion to the main character that we can all kind of attach to.
And those ones are the kind of the easier to write or create stories because there's no complex emotions beyond that until maybe the mid or final climax of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with creating main characters, Jacob, one of the things that I've always struggled with is you have a character's motivation, right? But you have their response to things happening.
Yes.
Now, where does driving the plot come towards in regards to the combination of motivation and responding to just stuff happening?
One of the things that I've heard is that you want the hero to basically mess up. Have them mess up early on, have them try to do something, they mess up, and then that kind of causes all the conflict in the story to happen. There might be some villain that's like behind the scenes plotting or, whatever. But having it be as a result of something the hero did, that automatically makes them super invested in the story, because then they actually have a reason of why they have to, solve the conflict, and not any other person in the world.
Okay, so this translates to something other than a superhero story, right? Because we don't necessarily have a villain plotting behind the scenes or anything like
right,
that.
But whatever your antagonist is, whether it's nature,
it could be a sickness or something.
Whatever.
It could be the fact that we're in a romance novel and she's gonna die, and the antagonist is time.
Sure, yeah.
So basically, the motivation comes down to their ability to drive the plot in a way that's compelling, but the reaction to it is the way to show them maybe messing up or showing that emotion that's complex beyond just what we initially see of the main character.
Right. A lot of the times, especially with young adult fiction nowadays, we'll get something where the actual main character, if anything, is the villain, and the hero, the main character, is just responding to all the things that the villain is doing.
Oh, talk about that a little bit, because I think you might have lost a couple people there. When you say the main character, you're actually meaning the trope of the main character, meaning the person driving the plot.
Right.
You're not actually meaning the focal point perspective.
Sure, yeah. Sometimes you can have the focal point perspective main character that is not actually the one driving the plot. But most of the time that's the case, or at least the story will make it so that they try to have that be the case.
Right. Okay.
But then sometimes, say in superhero movies, one of the reasons that a lot of the times people like the villains more than the main characters is because the villains are the ones that are actually instigating stuff to happen.
And then the heroes are basically just reacting to the villain
and trying to maintain the status quo.
Interesting. So when I write characters, I tend to kind of delve off a little bit from my main characters and make that really interesting side character.
Yes.
We all have that one interesting side character, and they kind of
steal
the show and overtake even the main character. Mm-hmm. How can I create a compelling main character that doesn't in turn then overshadow the potential for side characters?
I don't think it's possible for the main character to overshadow side characters unless the side characters just aren't that good. Because we spend so much time with the main character, we will pick out any of those times that it's focusing on someone else. Right? So in that sense, the side characters have extra spotlight, because anything they do, a side character might have, say 20 lines in a story, whereas the hero has 200.
Right.
So there's the idea is that there's going to be a lot more thought behind those 20 lines.
Right. It's a qualitative process rather than a quantitative process.
Exactly.
Because one is just naturally going to have more than the other.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's an example. I really love Zuko's character from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes.
He is a main character, I would say.
Yeah.
He is also an antagonist for the majority of the story. With having an antagonist be a dual main character, so to speak, or even a one of many main characters.
Yeah.
So in the ensemble cast kind of format, for instance, where we're not talking about first person, we have maybe 5 or 6 main characters, and one of them is an antagonist. How, is that the only great example of a really good antagonist character arc that they go through? Or can you, show me some other examples of main characters and ensemble casts that go through really good arcs? Or maybe just what would be a good way to give meaningful character arcs in an ensemble cast?
Zuko is a great one, and I would say one of the main reasons that he's a great one is because he has personal motivations and goals that we can get behind. A lot of the times people conflate antagonist with villain, and it's not the same thing.
Sure.
An antagonist is someone who is working in contrary with the hero, with the protagonist, right? Their actions have a negative effect on what the protagonist is trying to do. The villain is the evil person that
kicks puppies.
That kicks puppies, and is wanting to seek an end to all humanity for reasons. So that, I would say, is the first step in getting a
giving them a clear, meaningful
character.
goal that is contrary to the protagonist just makes them an antagonist. But
Right.
I'm talking about an arc. Like, what kind of way would you craft a character specifically around the idea of them going through said arc?
Well, Zuko's, just a fantastic example because he starts out one way and he really grows across the story.
Absolutely.
Like, and he ends up being almost
one of my favorite characters in the whole show.
Yeah, he's almost a completely different person by the end of it. Really, I would say Game of Thrones is where you can look at this and see how it's done well.
So another example of that would be like one of the characters there, like
Jaime.
Jaime. Oh,
Because
you're
Jaime,
right.
he's totally an antagonist. He's not a great guy, but gosh dang it, we root for him. Like seeing where he starts out and how he grows, even if he recedes a little bit, even if he falls back into his old way of doing things.
Sadly, yeah.
But that's still, oh boy.
So Jaime, let's kind of pick him apart. For instance, he kind of starts as the negative Prince Charming. He is everything a knight should be, and he's also everything
a knight shouldn't be. Yeah.
So he has that duality within him. One of the things that you talked about was clear motivations and goals. Jaime's goals and motivations are all over the place, actually, and I think that kind of sets the stage for his eventual kind of falling from his current status.
Sure.
He suffers kind of an unfortunate military defeat, which kind of puts him in the hands of the Starks. But, just from that part there, he's still a smug bastard. Like, there's nothing really about him that, sees redemption or character arc in any way. So what was it that really started to kind of move him along towards an actual character arc? Like,
well, I would say a lot of the times people conflate character development with changing who they are as a person.
Okay.
Zuko definitely sort of changed who he was as a person, but at the end of the day, he was still, that brooding sort of teenager.
Yeah.
But he'd found his own way.
Sure.
With Jaime, he's still the smug bastard, right? He's not leaving that completely because
Correct.
that is a fundamental part of his personality. Mm-hmm. But he's growing.
Growing in maturity a little bit,
but
he's not a child, so that
not
that
at
kind
all.
of stuff is less evident.
Yes,
I would say,
and that's one of the reasons why I would say he's a great example of it because it's a lot harder to do growth in adults in a way that's believable than with children.
Good point. Otherwise, you have to kind of just shock them with some dramatic trauma.
Exactly,
and even then seems kind of contrived because that's more of what you do with the kids in general.
Right. Okay, so as a comparison type thing, Avatar: The Last Airbender versus Legend of Korra. We had some great character growth in both of those shows. Mm-hmm. But if you look at how the character growth was for the kids in the original series versus how it was not for Korra but for the adults, where say Boomy had issues.
Or Tenzin.
Yeah, like Tenzin. Mm-hmm. It was great development. But when they brought up the things of them still having problems of daddy not giving them enough attention, part of you wonders these guys are almost 50 years old. They haven't gotten over this yet.
Right.
That's because people tend to be a bit.
Yeah, they're kind of writing them as if they're still teenagers to an extent,
right.
And that's not necessarily that. You can only write, good character development as teenagers. It's just harder to write it for adults in a way that's believable.
Right.
Yeah, because to an extent, the younger they are, the simpler you can kind of boil down a lot of their motivations to be because they don't have the complexity of experience.
Yeah.
So Jaime Lannister in particular, he kind of, I was going to bring this up, I was going to say he actually kind of goes through a little bit of the trauma thing that changes him. It's very dramatic. He loses a hand.
And his fighting hand, no less.
Yeah, his fighting hand. So that was I would say a half, so to speak, of his identity that he basically got kind of flushed down the toilet. So at that point, he's being escorted by Brienne. He's kind of learning a little bit more about how other people think about the Lannisters or about the world. And this happens, and they have that scene in the bath.
Oh my gosh, that scene is so good.
And it's so good. But how do powerful moments like that play into character development and character arcs? Because I feel like sometimes they're used as a bit of a crutch to have a powerful moment rather than a series of small moments.
Sure. Yes, that's an excellent point. And one of the reasons that I would say Jaime is a good example of that not being a problem is because he didn't just have this pivotal about-face turn.
That's true.
Now he's a good guy. He still wasn't a great guy. Like, and I would say that's one of the things that makes it more realistic, even though sometimes we say we want him to just, be a good guy through and through, but really if he had done that, we would have lost respect for him as a character.
He would have seemed a little bit too wishy-washy. And we've already seen him when he goes through moments where he flips a 180, so to speak. That's part of his whole character being called the Kingslayer, was that there was a moment where people are like, oh, you suddenly flipped a 180 and you killed your king, you're horrible. When actually, it was a series of small things that grew into big things, that grew into large things, that grew into horrible things. And then he had to kill his king. He had to. He wasn't faced with a choice. So in a way, his character is one that actually doesn't want to make those types of choices. He avoids those types of choices.
Yeah, he's doing the same thing with Cersei.
He is doing the same thing with Cersei right now. So what we've come to is a character that was kind of a little bit naive, a little bit cocky, a little bit, a little bit fresh, I would say.
Yes.
And kind of bumping into Ned Stark and looking for a fight. And he had his smug moments and stuff. But to where he is now, we see a character that's kind of a seasoned veteran of a long, bloody, chaotic conflict between just too many people and too many sides. And he right now seems to be holding on to the only thing he really knows as familiar, because he's lost his father, he's lost Tyrion.
He's lost his kids.
He's lost a whole lot of vision, I would say, for what he wants his life to go. And I think that's what makes him one of the more interesting characters, is right now his motivations seem really fuzzy, but you can tell where his character is going to lead him in a way that could be compelling.
Because they're not doing melodrama with like when there's fuzzy motivations. Sometimes you can have the characters just get melodramatic and start really showcasing a lot of things that don't make for interesting storytelling. But they're not doing that with Jaime.
If anything, we're a little bit more excited about Jaime's potential, which is kind of hypocritical to an extent, because it shows that his character doesn't have a lot going for him right now.
But it shows that we've built an attachment to him.
Exactly, so that we know about where he could be. That's kind of how it was with Zuko, is that Zuko had a lot of moments where he regressed in his development because it made sense to an extent through where his character was in the given context. But we knew about his potential. And we were so attached to him that even though we got frustrated with where his character regressed, that attachment kind of carried us through it. But the crazy thing is that if Zuko had gone through that regression over and over and over again, it would have ruined our attachment to him.
It would
have. No character is immune to that.
Yes, no character is immune to that. And here's the other thing. It is very important that when you make a promise like that of like, oh, okay, the audience is like, but we can see what's coming and it's going to be amazing. You have to capitalize on that. You have to cash in on that, because otherwise unfulfilled promises leave a bitter taste in the mouth.
So this kind of leaves a perfect segue into what we were wanting to talk about with regards to characters that are main characters, but where things have gone a little bit awry. So I think we should go with where they have. That was very intentional. An alternate translation is Aria. But to an extent, it's not entirely her fault, right, Jacob?
No, it's the writer's fault.
It's the writer's fault. So we have in this most recent episode of Game of Thrones,
probably
but
the
not only
dumbest
this most recent
ever.
Yes, but also the recent season of Game of Thrones. We have poor Aria.
I mean, what a start. She was the very first person they showed in the season. She kills all the Freys. That was amazing. Like, her training's finally over. So now what is she going to do? She's going to argue with Sansa at home.
For the whole season.
Like, what?
But by the way, in order to pad for time, we're going to have her kind of be unsure about which direction she's going to go, and then she's going to randomly run into Hot Pie so that she is clearly moved along the writer's determined path for this.
Oh, and most of that time she spent traveling.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Just not even in the show, just on the road.
So, if you didn't know, Aria is Jacob's favorite character in Game of Thrones.
Yes, and I'm very salty right now.
And I would say Aria is like my second or third favorite.
Yeah.
Like Aria has gone through an arc.
Yeah.
Let's start on the let's take them back a little bit so they know how attached we are to Aria.
Aria in a lot of ways is the hero's journey.
It is.
Like straight up.
It's really almost perfectly displayed in
Yeah.
Aria because she's taken from her home in the very beginning.
Yep.
Kind of in a way with a little bit of excitement and curiosity.
Yes.
She's got that kind of youthful innocence of like, ooh,
Naive
this could be
optimism.
something
Yeah.
interesting that goes there. Almost immediately upon them leaving, she realizes it's not going to be all, amazing. Nymeria's gone. Her first real moment of kind of adventure is basically seeing not only what she loves taken away from her, but her own sister effectively betraying her.
Right.
Now, we want to make it clear, there is a lot of tension between Sansa and Arya built up from the very beginning of this show.
Yes.
But when we get to our rant about how it is currently,
Oh boy.
Once we've talked about this, you'll see how it doesn't fit at all.
And if you think about where Arya started out, right, to where she is now, she started out not really being able to do much of anything. She was chasing cats and stuff like that, and we loved it. It was awesome.
Yeah, her scenes with Syrio Forel
were just amazing.
Were some of the best the shows have provided for us.
Yes, absolutely.
And also, let's give some credit to kind of where the show kind of takes her through. She makes it through some scary crap. Like, she almost dies way too many times. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing of her escaping King's Landing and hiding out, pretending to be a boy named Aria, and meeting Gendry and Hot Pie and
Tywin.
Yeah, bumping into the Brotherhood Without Banners and Tywin Lannister. There's so many moments where Arya gets to kind of flex her character's muscles, so to speak, in being an original character. But then she interacts with all these other people that give her extra perspective.
Oh yeah, and it's so good. And one of the things that Martin does really well in Game of Thrones, and hence the show does well too, is setting up long-term sort of like slow burn anticipation plot points. And Arya
is a great example.
Like the only one I could think of that's better is Dany's dragons. And that's a very close call. Like
right, because Dany's dragons were like episode 1. I would say to an extent Bran Stark is another example of that. That's done it pretty well. Yeah. Bran is the first character to be introduced in Game of Thrones, basically through the book's perspective. It's like the very first perspective chapter.
Yep.
But what Arya has is this very constant slight drip feed of character development.
And she's such good character development.
Yeah, and she's constantly learning that the world isn't what she thought it was. It's way harsher, more brutal. There's a lot of people out there that, go through struggles that she's never going to fully understand or really come to grips with. But she has this burning, typical kind of revenge plot that she's going through. But instead of focusing solely on that, that's just one aspect of her character.
Right, that's just where she's going in the long term. But there's the journey along the whole way, and it's amazing.
She bumps into Jack and Hagar.
That whole...
Guys, that whole part was an example of a really slow burn plot that got set up from something crazy. Like, Arya basically was given a genie with 3 wishes and didn't know she had an all-powerful genie.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about the kind of things that have bumped through Arya's path, and she just didn't realize its importance then. But as she grew up, as she kind of goes through the whole thing with the Faceless Men, she goes through her journeys with the Hound.
Yep.
All this stuff is teaching her basically not only how to handle herself, but how to go from being a reactive character to a proactive character. And that difference, guys, is huge.
Right.
There are so many reactive characters that people tend to just get frustrated with, and they don't really know why, so they kind of lash out and call those characters names or something like that. I remember the hate towards Sansa at one point. And a reactive character is not a bad character.
Right.
But you have to know that structure means that they're not going to be driving their own story. But when a character switches from reactive to proactive...
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah,
now, I would say that Aria is actually an example of someone who's almost proactive. Because in her situations, she does not have the power to be truly proactive. But she tries.
But not only that, we get the hints that eventually... very soon, you will be a proactive character. It's coming, and we can feel that anticipation building.
And it is done so well, so dang well.
And we had some slow bits. We had the parts where she was actually training with the Faceless Men, and it was a bit slow. But the idea is that we're so invested in her character and in her story
that totally carries us through it.
It carries us through it because we can see that this is another step towards her becoming that perfectly proactive character. So fast forward to where we're at right now. The first thing she does this episode is be a proactive character.
She kills all the Freys. That was amazing.
Fantastic.
It's like, this is what we've been waiting for. We have been waiting for this for a long time. All that stuff that was like the light at the end of the tunnel with her training with the Faceless people, it was because we knew she was gonna do stuff like this. And then once that's over,
they completely put a halt on everything.
Aria is like one of the characters that could have been like one of the most plot shifting people other than like Bran. Daenerys. She
became more plot shifting than Cersei once she started killing all the Freys.
Like, she literally could have just ended the war, and all the battles and stuff that happened could have just not happened.
Right, and to an extent, we're not here to talk about what would have happened. Like, we're here to really rant about what they chose to do.
Yeah, now, especially when you don't have many episodes left in the show. Like, if you think about how many episodes Game of Thrones has left, and how much of that they decided to have Arya just argue with Sansa and do nothing and wait at Winterfell because why? Jon's gonna come back at some time in the 8th season.
It's an unfortunate thing where we can really smell the writers running out of ideas.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we've been there.
Yes.
We know what that's like. And that's why we can tell that this is what it is.
Right.
So when, the season finale happens next week and we find out that it was all building to this thing, which is obviously going to be
Red Wedding 2.0 or...
Well, no, I'm talking about with Littlefinger. Littlefinger has to die, right?
Yeah.
But that's the only way they can. That's the only way they can redeem this. But yeah, imagine if they just decided, go straight to Winterfell after this, or they have to find some way to make it so that Arya has to go to Winterfell. What they have is basically an idea to instigate melodrama, like we talked about previously, to cover up for the fact that there is no real substance to this writing.
Right.
So we're calling it out for what it is, guys. We were not saying that this episode was the only example of that terrible writing. It was that this episode was supposed to be one of the points where they would actually move it forward. This is the
penultimate episode.
So yes, there's a possibility that they do a bit to redeem it in the next episode, but it's kind of too late for that.
Yeah,
they kind of wasted.
It really is.
They kind of wasted their time already. So
even if they said that Arya and Sansa were actually just playing Littlefinger this whole time, it still wouldn't excuse the amount of time we had to watch them just being stupid little girls. Ned said to them, summertime you can fight and whatever, but when winter comes you have to stick together, and winter's here,
and we sound like we're chiding them because we are, but really there are so many better ways that they could have done this, and what you have is two characters that we've grown attached to. But I would say that I've grown attached to Arya more than Sansa, and I want to tell you, these episodes made me less attached to Arya than I was to Sansa.
Yeah. Like,
do you realize how bad that is?
That doesn't happen easily.
Like, Sansa's character was dealt unfortunate hands, like multiple hands, constantly throughout the last few seasons, or even the entire show.
Right.
But the point is that her character has to go through those struggles so that she can have some final kind of like sweet justice at the end of all this, with like Littlefinger dying, for instance, by her hand, hopefully, which would be really good.
She has the dagger now.
Yeah, and all of this could lead up to that. But you can't excuse with what you did with Aria.
Yeah,
like that was just bad. Writing.
It was like, really bad.
Really bad.
Yeah.
Not just this episode, the previous ones, with basically everything of what she did at Winterfell.
And here's the other thing. It doesn't make sense that Littlefinger's plan would actually be working, even if they didn't know how manipulative Littlefinger was. Like, because Aria, okay, she doesn't know Littlefinger that well, but when she brings up the letter to Sansa, it would have come up that she found it in Littlefinger's place. Like, I stole this from Littlefinger, whatever.
This is one of those examples of when people, all they need to do is just say one thing, and suddenly the whole conflict goes away.
Right.
But we don't want them to say that, because then the conflict would go away.
And then what will they do? Will they actually like contribute to the plot and like kill off other main characters that are problems right now? And we can't have that.
Yeah, and I don't want to accuse Dan and Dave of this, but this also kind of reeks of a thing of, well, main character Jesus Snow has left Winterfell. We can't have any real plot happening where he's not. So sorry, female characters.
Yeah, let's talk about this for a second, because as far as like female character awesomeness in this episode specifically, like in the other episodes there was a lot of it, and it was great. But in this episode, Arya and Sansa, all of that is completely like unnecessary. You can just take it out and the show would be better for it. And Dany, the only thing she did this episode is she pined over Jon. Like basically that was what happened.
Well, and she provided a means for
Jon,
quick teleportation from Raven to Dragon, which, to be fair, this is the end of the show. Right. We don't have time to see people traveling and stuff like that.
Like what they did with Arya.
But the idea of the interactions between Jon and Dany were something that we were really excited to see.
And we
can't help the fact that we want them to get together and everything like that. It's what the show has been leading for so long. But it's hard, apparently, for these writers to do the things that we want to see happen without regressing the characters. Yeah. So characterization, guys, goes above fan service.
Yes, absolutely.
I can't say this enough. There's a couple other shows I remember that did this very same thing, where characterization was sacrificed on the altar of fan service.
Heroes.
Heroes was a great example of that. But there's a couple others. So we love characters, but Game of Thrones
does amazing
characters. And I want to bring up like my favorite character in this instance, which is Tyrion. And I'm not gonna rant or anything about Tyrion, because this is an example of a character arc, of characterization that has been probably the most consistent of every character across the entire show. And it's kind of unfair because he's lasted longer than most characters, so it's easy to throw him into it's easy to throw him into the mix when you could just grab someone who'd been alive for one season, like Oberyn Martell, who's one of my favorites when he was around. Yeah. But Tyrion, he starts off just being a curious, smug little bastard. And he feels like one to his family, and he is kind of one in how he treats just other people who are dumb. But he also has this complexity in that he cares for those who are cripples and broken things,
outcasts
and outcasts and the like.
And he's another great example of an antagonist that had motivations, and we grew to like them more than some of the main characters. Like
in fact, I would say most people's main character in Game of Thrones, favorite main character in Game of Thrones, is Tyrion. Right. I'm sure a lot of people love Dany and Jon because they're huge drivers of the plot. I would say Dany way more so than Jon, but Tyrion is just good to have around.
He really is.
One of the things that Tyrion did well throughout the series was his dialogue, but I want to bring into question more actually how his characterization didn't get ruined by him going through these
regression periods.
I would say periods of time where his character had to kind of take a step back and reevaluate what his character was. Like after the Battle of the Blackwater, he kind of goes through this, not really depression, but kind of this slump. And his character has to kind of fall back to kind of what he knows, which is drinking booze and
knowing things.
Yeah, exactly. So that happens again a little bit later with the trial.
Yes.
But one of the things that Tyrion has that makes him endearing as a character beyond just his witty humor and his jokes and his amazing dialogue is that he's an underdog, okay?
Yeah.
But he's like the underdog.
He really is.
You realize it more and more when you see that he is using every single bit of what the writer, George R. Martin and the writers in the television show have given him to its fullest extent all the time, and yet he is actually almost always behind on things, like just a little bit, and not that he's not, one or two steps ahead of dumb people like Janna Slint or
Cersei
or Pycelle or something like that. Cersei's pretty smart. Give her some credit.
What was that thing about half as clever, twice as clever, and all that?
Right? Yeah, exactly. So with where he is right now, he's kind of come to that I know where I am, I know what I'm meant to do position. So his character kind of remains in that kind of role of the advisor and the person who kind of knows things, and he doesn't drink as much anymore, but he's just kind of helping move the plot along in that respect. His characterization is there, but it's lessened because he needs to move the plot forward. Now, the reason why this is okay for someone like him and not Aria is because his characterization has decided to fall back to the foundations, but not actually regress.
Exactly.
So his character arc regresses. Like, he has parts where he actually loses steps in the terms of where things are going. The trial is the perfect example.
Yep.
Shay betrays him. His father tries to have him killed.
He kills his father.
He kills his father. He has to run away to Essos with Varys.
And he kind of just drinks over there for a while.
Actually, his character over there has to go through a bit of a rediscovering of what it means to be Tyrion Lannister.
Right.
But as to where he comes through, he basically recycles that bit where at the end of Blackwater he's at the lowest point.
Yep.
And he slowly climbs his way back up using the exact same things we've seen him use every single time, and it's consistent. It might be repetitive, which is maybe the only thing that's weak about Tyrion's character.
Sure, but he does it well.
He
sticks to his guns.
So if you have something that's maybe a complex plot, say that, the Aria Sansa thing in the writer's head is a very complex plot, and they're trying to execute it and do it justice. Where they're failing is simply in the execution.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyrion's plots are, I would say, a little bit complex, but actually not as complex. Not as much as they were back in like seasons 1, 2, and maybe 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But with this, you have Tyrion executing a very simple plot almost perfectly. I would say there's some dips here and there, but Tyrion's characterization was not sacrificed so that he could have moments or so that he could be put into a complex plot.
Right.
So that being said, that's my little thing about Tyrion. We love Game of Thrones, guys. We love Game of Thrones, and it's only because we love Game of Thrones that we actually talk about it and even in some cases rant about it.
Yeah. And
because we're kind of, fundamentally still a reaction channel to some extent, we feel like we need to have a platform to where we can tell you guys when something is not going well.
Yes.
Because when we were editing the most recent Game of Thrones episode, we cut out
Arya and Sansa.
All of Arya and Sansa's stuff.
And we did not feel bad about it.
No, because actually our reactions to it were pretty negative.
We were just like,
Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So we want to be there to make you guys have a great time and stuff like that. But we also want to let you know that we are, like, really big fans of good story.
Yes, that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, so when story comes around that really, really disappoints us, it's because our standards were not met.
Yes, and here's the thing. That kind of a thing I might excuse in another show as just being like, oh, it's one of the problems, because the show is not that amazing of a show. But with Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones has some of the best dang character writing I have ever seen. You can't have this happen.
Nope.
Like, especially not this close to the ending of it.
If anything, do more teleporting and weird stuff just to get rid of this kind of thing so you can save time.
Right.
We would rather have unconventional, slight plot holes than bad characterization.
Right.
Like, let's be real here. There were some things that goofed us up, like, in a bit with the whole Night King throwing a lance at the flying dragon
instead
rather
of
than Drogon, where he's just sitting there, and that's where all the people on there. Yeah. Whatever. It's a thing.
Or why the Hound started throwing rocks at the walkers.
It's just things that, okay, cool. We'll just roll with it.
Because it's the end of the show and you have to keep things moving at a clip pace.
Yes. But when you take a character that everyone cares about, or two characters that, a lot of people do care about, and you actually turn back the wheels on what brought their characters to this point, it has a cancerous effect on the characters attached to their story.
Yep.
So Brienne gets shafted. She has almost nothing to do this whole thing because she gets sent away, which I know is just a dumb thing that Sansa's doing because she's afraid right now, or just making decisions.
because Brienne has to be in King's Landing to see Jaime again. Like,
yeah, we get it. You're trying to move the plot around. It's cool. But then Littlefinger, who actually is a very cunning character, even though he should have been dead a while ago, he just looks stupid.
And and he literally just had his moment where Bran turned him inside out.
Right? Yeah, well, he could have. He almost threatened Baelish with that.
Just chaos is a ladder.
And Baelish is like,
and Baelish,
oh, crap.
Baelish was terrified. There is no reason he should be sticking around right now.
Well, not I would say, he will stick around for the chaos and stuff. But there's no reason why he... there's no reason why he lasted that long after Bran gives him something like that. So, guys, we can rant, we can rave about the story kind of not going ways we would have wanted it to go, but it's really just about the characterization.
Yep.
Like, if you found a way to do even the melodrama bits with a way that was redeemable
and more
believable, that's great.
Yeah.
Melodrama is not a bad thing in and of itself. It's when you sacrifice characterization and motivation and all this other stuff so that we can have melodrama that doesn't really lead anywhere.
Yeah.
That's when we get really
salty.
Really salty. Yeah. I'd say salty is a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
We kind of made a commitment to make sure that this podcast wouldn't go too long.
Right.
So this one's kind of going to be an unusual one, but guys, we've made a commitment now to have our podcasts be live, like I said, on Mondays for everyone. So we'll be doing announcements, a general kind of a discussion type, format, and letting you know about, new things happening in our channel here and there. But
so leave comments or and questions on this one.
Yeah. So any comments you leave on this will be put into a Q&A for the next episode.
Right.
And we're sorry about all the craziness with trying to figure out wait, this podcast thing.
I can't believe we actually didn't think about that.
Yeah, we didn't think about that at all. It was kind of funny because one thing to be honest was we did not think we would get this much support on Patreon this quickly. So the podcast hasn't been perfectly planned yet. But guys, we're sticking to it.
That's right.
We're going all the way, and what we're going to do, a year from now, is look back on an episode like this and laugh at it because
you're like, oh gosh, that was so terrible. Yeah.
It'll be like our Ruby reactions from Volume 4. We'll just kind of be like, remember when our camera quality and microphone and all that stuff was not there? Yeah, that was fun. All right, guys, y'all are awesome. We'll see you again next time. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.